Sir, that figure is incorrect.
Not correct.
My name is Daniel Reeves, and on my third day at Whitmore Capital, I corrected the CEO in front of 40 employees. We were in the glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of a Manhattan tower, the kind of room where silence costs money. Richard Whitmore, 62 years old, was presenting numbers to the board when I noticed his projection was wrong. Badly wrong. Millions wrong. I raised my hand. I shouldn't have. Sir, that figure is incorrect. The room froze. Coffee cups stopped midair. Someone near the window actually gasped. Richard Whitmore turned toward me slowly, his jaw tightening, and for 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. Then he said 4 words that made my stomach drop. Come to my office. Everyone at that table already knew what happened to people who embarrassed Richard Whitmore. I was about to find out the hard way. I followed Richard Whitmore down a hallway that felt 20 degrees colder than the conference room. Nobody looked at me. Not my manager, not the interns who'd been so friendly at orientation 2 days earlier. It was like watching a man walk to his own execution and pretending not to notice. His office door closed with a click that sounded too final for a piece of glass and metal. Sit, he said. I sat. My hands were shaking, though I tried to hide them under the table. Richard didn't sit. He stood at the window, staring down at Manhattan traffic 40 floors below, silent for what felt like a full minute. Then he turned around, and his expression wasn't anger. It was something closer to shock. Say that number again, he said quietly, the one you corrected me on. I repeated it. He walked to his desk, pulled up the same spreadsheet on his monitor, and went pale, actually pale, staring at the screen like he'd seen something impossible. How, he asked, not looking up, does a first-week analyst catch an error that 3 senior VPs missed for 6 months? I didn't have an answer he was going to like. Richard didn't ask again. He just stared at me, waiting. I used to audit spreadsheets like this for free, I said finally, before Whitmore Capital. That wasn't the whole truth, and he could tell. 2 years earlier, I'd been sitting in a foreclosure office in Ohio, not a boardroom. My father's small accounting firm had collapsed after a client's fraud case buried us in debt we didn't create. I spent 18 months teaching myself forensic accounting from library books and free online courses, driven by one obsession: never again would a hidden error destroy a family that didn't see it coming. I didn't tell Richard any of that, not yet. What I did tell him was smaller, sharper. I check every number 3 times. It's a habit I can't turn off. Richard studied me, like he was recalculating something in his head. Not the spreadsheet this time. Me. Most people in this building don't triple-check anything, he said. They trust the system. Systems fail, I said. People just don't notice until it's too late. Something shifted in his eyes. He hadn't expected that answer. Richard turned back to his monitor, scrolling through the spreadsheet again, his jaw tight with concentration. Then he stopped scrolling. He stopped completely. This account, he said slowly, Meridian Holdings. Do you know whose name is attached to it? I shook my head. I'd only flagged the numbers, not the client list. He turned the monitor toward me. My stomach dropped. The account belonged to Preston Cole, the same investor who had orchestrated the fraud that destroyed my father's firm. The same man I'd spent 2 years building a case against in my spare time, quietly, with no lawyer and no money, just spreadsheets and rage. You know him, Richard said. It wasn't a question. He'd seen my face change. I know what he did to people, I said carefully. Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping. Preston Cole has been embezzling from this firm for 6 months, hasn't he? And you just proved it by accident. The room felt smaller suddenly. If Richard was right, I hadn't just corrected a number. I'd exposed the man who ruined my family, and put myself directly in his path. Richard's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. "Preston Cole," he said. My pulse spiked. "Don't answer it." "He's a major shareholder, Daniel. I have to." Richard picked up, put it on speaker before I could stop him. Preston's voice filled the room, smooth and confident, the same voice I remembered from 6 years ago, standing on a courthouse steps, smiling for cameras, while my father lost everything. "Richard, I heard something interesting happened in the boardroom today," Preston said. "A new hire embarrassing you in front of the board? That's bad optics. I'd fire him before this gets out." Richard glanced at me. I said nothing, my hands clenched under the table. "Actually," Richard said carefully, "the new hire caught a discrepancy in your account. 6 months of unexplained withdrawals. Silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. "That's a misunderstanding," Preston said finally, his tone shifting, colder now. "I'd hate for a rookie's mistake to cost him his career." The call ended. Richard set the phone down slowly. "That wasn't a denial," he said. "That was a threat. And it was aimed directly at me." Richard stood up and walked to the door, checking the hallway before closing it again. A small gesture, but it told me everything. He was scared too. "Listen to me carefully," he said, sitting back down. "Preston Cole doesn't make idle threats. 3 years ago, an internal auditor raised questions about one of his accounts. That auditor was gone within a month. Officially, he resigned." "And unofficially?" I asked. Richard didn't answer that. He didn't have to. My hands were cold. I thought about my father, about the 18 months of self-taught forensic work that led me here by pure coincidence, about how close I'd come to finally having proof, and how quickly it could be taken from me again. "I could bury this," I said quietly. "Pretend I never saw it." Richard shook his head. "You already saw it. So did I, and Preston knows. We both know. That was the trap. There was no version of this where I walked away clean." "So what do we do?" I asked. Richard's expression changed, calculating, careful, almost cold. "We need proof before he destroys it, and we don't have much time." Richard pulled up the account history again, his fingers moving fast across the keyboard. Then he froze. "They're gone," he said. "What's gone?" "The transaction logs. The ones you flagged an hour ago." He scrolled up, down, refreshed the page. Nothing. Someone deleted 6 months of records in the last 20 minutes. My chest tightened. "Preston. He has server access. Every shareholder above a certain tier does." Richard's voice was low now, urgent. "Whatever you saw, Daniel, if you didn't screenshot it, write it down, anything. It might be the only proof left." I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I had taken a photo. Just one, almost by instinct, back in the conference room, when the numbers first didn't add up. I held it up. Richard exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for a year. "That's not enough for a courtroom," he said, "but it's enough to start." Then his desk phone rang, the internal line this time, not his cell. He answered, listened, and his face went pale for the second time that day. "Security is on their way up," he said. "They're here for you." "Security doesn't come for new hires over a boardroom disagreement," I said, standing so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. "They don't know why they're coming," Richard said, already moving toward his desk drawer. Someone above me issued the order. "Preston moves fast." Through the glass wall, I saw them. 2 security officers stepping out of the elevator, scanning the floor, walking with purpose. Employees at nearby desks looked up, then quickly looked back down at their screens, pretending not to notice. Nobody wanted to be near whatever was about to happen. "Give me your phone," Richard said suddenly. I hesitated. "Trust me or don't," he said, "but in about 90 seconds, they're going to ask for it, and if it's on you, They'll take it and delete that photo before you even reach the lobby. I handed it over. He moved to a small safe behind a painting on his wall, entered a code, and locked it inside. The door opened before I could ask what came next. "Mr. Reeves," the security officer said, "you need to come with us." Richard caught my eye. He mouthed one word: "Wait." The walk to the elevator felt endless. 2 security officers flanked me, one on each side, saying nothing, their faces unreadable. Every employee I passed stopped typing, stopped talking, just watched. I recognized the same silence from the boardroom hours earlier, except this time, I was the one being escorted out, not just embarrassed. The elevator doors closed, 40 floors of silence. "Care to explain what happened up there?" one officer finally asked, not unkindly. "No," I said, "because I don't think you'd believe me." He almost smiled. "Try me." But before I could answer, the elevator stopped. Not at the lobby, at the 15th floor. The doors opened, and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped in, flashing a badge I didn't recognize. Corporate Compliance and Ethics. "Mr. Reeves," she said, studying me carefully, "I need you to come with me instead." The security officers exchanged a glance, neither of them expected to give. "Ma'am, our orders came from—" "I know where your orders came from," she interrupted. "That's exactly why I'm here." The elevator doors closed again, and for the first time all day, I wasn't sure who was actually protecting me. Her name was Karen Ellison, and she didn't speak again until the elevator reached the 12th floor, a level I'd never even seen on the directory. The office was small, windowless, lined with filing cabinets instead of glass walls, a different world from the 40th floor entirely. "Sit down, Daniel," she said, closing the door. "You're not in trouble, not with us anyway." "Then why the badge? Why pull me off security?" She opened a folder already sitting on her desk, thick, worn, clearly not new. "Because you're not the first person to flag irregularities in Preston Cole's accounts. You're the 4th. My breath caught. What happened to the other 3? Karen's expression tightened. 2 resigned under pressure. 1 filed a formal complaint and was terminated within a week for unrelated performance issues that appeared in his file overnight. And the 3rd? Stark. "The 3rd, she said quietly, "is the reason this investigation never actually closed. We've been building a case for 18 months. We just never had solid proof." She turned her laptop toward me. "Until you took that photo," she said. "Now we might." Karen slid 3 folders across the desk, each one labeled with a name and a date. "Marcus Webb, resigned 8 months ago," she said. "Sarah Kim, terminated 5 months ago. Both flagged discrepancies in Meridian Holdings before you ever did." I opened the first folder. Marcus Webb's resignation letter looked polished, professional, nothing suspicious on paper. But behind it was an internal memo, time-stamped 2 days before his resignation, questioning the exact account I'd found today. "He didn't quit," I said slowly. "He was pushed out." "We believe so. We couldn't prove it." Karen closed the folder. "Preston is careful. He never leaves fingerprints. Until today." "My photo." "Your photo," she confirmed, "combined with 3 prior complaints, creates a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence anymore." My phone was still locked in Richard's safe, 40 floors above us. Suddenly, that felt like the most important object in the building. "There's a shareholder meeting in 2 days," Karen said. "Preston will be presenting quarterly earnings to the full board, investors, press included. If we're going to move, it has to be before then." "Why before?" "Because after that," she said, "he'll have control of enough votes to bury this permanently." My new phone, a temporary one Karen handed me, buzzed within the hour. Richard's name flashed on the screen. "They're onto something," he said, voice low, like he was speaking from somewhere he shouldn't be overheard. "Preston just called an emergency board session. Tonight." "Tonight?" The shareholder meeting isn't for 2 days. He's moving it up, Richard said, which means he knows we're building a case. Someone tipped him off. My stomach dropped. Karen said only a handful of people know about this. Then a handful of people isn't as small as she thinks. Richard paused. Daniel, if he calls this session tonight, he's going to try to push through a vote that transfers oversight of Meridian Holdings to a shell entity he controls. Once that happens, the money trail disappears completely, legally. Can he do that? With enough votes, yes. And he has enough votes, unless something changes in the next 6 hours. I looked at Karen, who was already reading the tension on my face without hearing the call. What do you need from me? I asked Richard. His answer was immediate. Your photo. And you, in that boardroom tonight. The 40th floor boardroom looked different at 8 o'clock at night. The golden Manhattan skyline replaced by a wall of city lights. The air thick with tension instead of coffee and quarterly reports. Board members filed in one by one, confused, exchanging whispers about why an emergency session had been called with no warning. Preston Cole sat at the head of the table like he already owned it. He smiled when he saw me walk in beside Richard and Karen. Interesting, he said smoothly. I didn't realize we were inviting first-week analysts to board sessions now. A few members chuckled nervously. Nobody knew what was actually happening yet. Mr. Reeves has information relevant to tonight's vote, Karen said, standing at the front of the room, her voice steady and official. Preston's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. This is highly irregular, he said. I motion we proceed with the scheduled vote and address personnel matters separately. Second, said a board member near him quickly. Richard stood up before anyone could call for a vote. Before we do that, he said, I think everyone in this room deserves to see what Daniel found this afternoon. Preston's jaw tightened for the first time all night. Karen connected my phone to the display screen at the front of the room. The photo appeared, magnified, undeniable. 6 months of withdrawal records from Meridian Holdings, timestamps clearly visible, routed through accounts that traced directly back to Preston Cole. The room went silent. Someone's coffee cup clinked against a saucer, too loud in the stillness. This is fabricated, Preston said, but his voice had lost its smoothness, a doctored image from a disgruntled new hire, trying to make a name for himself. It's not doctored, Richard said calmly. It matches server logs pulled before they were deleted, 20 minutes after Daniel flagged the discrepancy. Deleted by an account, with your credentials, Preston. A board member near the back stood up slowly. Wait, deleted records? That's not a personnel issue. That's obstruction. Murmurs spread across the table like fire catching dry grass. Preston's composure cracked for the first time all night. You're all overreacting to a rookie's mistake. Marcus Webb wasn't a rookie, I said quietly. Neither was Sarah Kim. They found this before I did, and you made sure they disappeared quietly. Preston's face went white. The room had already decided who to believe. Preston stood up, gripping the edge of the table. This is a witch hunt. I built half this firm's portfolio. You'd throw that away over the word of a first-week analyst? Before Richard could answer, Preston reached into his jacket and placed a single folder on the table. Before anyone votes on anything, he said, you should know Richard Whitmore approved 3 of these transfers personally. His signature is on page 4. The room shifted instantly. Whispers. Richard's face went rigid. I felt the ground tilt. Had Richard known? That signature is forged, Richard said, but his voice cracked slightly, enough for doubt to ripple across the table. I didn't raise my voice. Then let the same independent auditors verify that too, alongside everything else. Silence. Preston hadn't expected that answer. A board member near the back stood slowly. I move we accept full independent audit. Every signature, every account, no exceptions. Preston's composure cracked for the first time all night.
Second, said another voice. Hands rose around the table, one by one, including, after a long pause, Richard's own. He met my eyes. Whatever this cost him, he wasn't backing down either.
3 months later, the independent audit cleared Richard completely. The signature had been digitally forged, traced back to an account Preston controlled. Preston himself was under federal review. Marcus Webb and Sarah Kim were reinstated, quietly, with apologies neither of them had asked for out loud. I still worked on the 40th floor, my desk now closer to Richard's office. One afternoon, he stopped by holding a folder. Not evidence this time. A promotion letter. "You could have hesitated when Preston pulled that forged signature," he said. "Most people would have doubted me." I did, for a second, I admitted. Then I remembered. The man forging signatures doesn't usually hand you the folder himself. Richard almost smiled. That's exactly what gave him away, wasn't it? "Somebody just had to notice," I said. He set the folder on my desk, then paused at the door. "One more thing. Marcus Webb requested to be on your team, said he wants to work with someone who checks numbers 3 times. I looked out at the skyline, no longer just Richard's view. For the first time, it felt like mine too.